Live from Sydney, 7 News with Sally Bowery.
Good afternoon. The Prime Minister has declared Australians have earned an early mark when it comes to lockdowns. National Cabinet will bring forward its decision on whether to relax them. The best sign yet, we may be getting out of this crisis sooner rather than later. Live to Olivia Leeming in Canberra for us today. Hello to you, Olivia. When will a decision be made?
Well, Sal, Scott Morrison has announced National Cabinet will determine next Friday whether social restrictions will be lifted. Now, that is a week earlier than planned after today's talks with the premiers, bringing that decision forward thanks to most Australians abiding by social distancing measures. Mobile phone data given to the government by Apple and Google showing more people are staying at home. Next week's decision, though, will depend on how many Australians have downloaded the government's COVID-safe tracing app to help stop the spread, with more than 3.5 million people using it so far.
Australians have earned an early mark through the work that they have done. We need to restart our economy. We need to restart our society. We can't keep Australia under the doona. We need to be able to move ahead.
And Olivia, the Prime Minister has also announced more support for aged care centres.
Yeah, a one-off payment of $205 million for aged care facilities across the country to cover costs like extra staff, extra screening of staff and visitors, and more personal protective equipment. That's $900 per resident for nursing homes in our cities and $1,350 for those in regional areas.
It will keep those who are in aged care facilities safer and give their families greater peace of mind when it comes to how those issues are being managed.
Now, that's funding that's been welcomed by the sector, with 8 aged care facilities still dealing with an outbreak, Sal.
OK, thanks very much. Olivia Leeming there for us. Well, as we wait to see what will come of that meeting in Canberra next week, today marks the beginning of easing of restrictions here in New South Wales. Happy days are not quite here again, but the weekend promises to be a less lonely one for many residents. Marley Hogan is covering the story. Marley, it's a step towards normality, but a very cautious one.
Good afternoon, Sally. Well, from today, friends and family have been allowed to reconnect with a home visit. 2 adults and their children are allowed to visit another household, and there are no restrictions on how far you can travel to do that. For example, if you live in Sydney but your sister or friend lives in Port Macquarie, you can drive up the coast to see them, but you still have to practice social distancing while catching up, and those catch-ups are restricted to the home. The 2-person limit still applies in public places. And the government is urging people to be cautious when visiting older or vulnerable loved ones.
You shouldn't go to someone's home who's not well, and you certainly shouldn't be leaving your home if you're not well.
The government is also urging people to get tested. Even those with mild symptoms are being asked to come forward. It will be key in stopping the spread.
You don't need to wait till Monday, because hours could be crucial.
In an Australian first, those test results have been broken down by postcode in New South Wales and made available in these heat maps. It will tell the public if they live in a hotspot, how many active cases are in their suburb, and also how many people have recovered.
Thanks, Miley. A 13th infected resident of the coronavirus-plagued Newmarch House aged care home has died, as health authorities admit they don't know how COVID-19 keeps spreading inside. Reporter Alex Hart is outside the facility near Penrith. Alex, what do we know about the latest victim?
Sally, he was a 74-year-old man, the operator of Newmarch House Anglicare, confirming his death in a statement this morning. He's the 13th COVID-19 sufferer to die in just 2 weeks. 24 residents remain infected. The positive tests for 3 of them only confirmed yesterday. Health authorities admit they don't know how the virus keeps spreading inside.
Whether it will be the staff that have infected the patients, or whether there's something else that we're missing.
There are now calls for all uninfected residents to be removed from this facility as soon as possible and to be quarantined somewhere else.
And the options are another facility that is currently vacant, if that exists, a hospital that might have a vacant ward.
There is the opportunity for them to go to Nepean Hospital to be looked after so that they too do not catch COVID-19.
To the best of my understanding, all options are available to residents.
The relatives of some infected residents have told 7 News they feel pressured by doctors not to send their loved ones to hospital.
But essentially there's a 60% chance it's not going to be good, and we will only be transferring those patients to hospital if there are other health concerns other than COVID.
Tonight at 6, we'll hear more explosive claims from another relative about the standard of care here during his loved one's final stages of life. Sally?
Alex Hart there. The NRL season's restart still needs to overcome some hurdles this afternoon. Border Force is yet to make a decision as to whether the New Zealand Warriors will be allowed into the country. Peter Fegan joins us live. Pete, more headaches for the game. How likely is the season to resume later this month?
Well, Sal, it really is the $64 million question. It was just yesterday that there was rumours of a rift between the players and the NRL. That certainly put a dent in their chances of kicking off again on the 28th of May. But today, the game faces even bigger hurdles. The biggest issue is the Commonwealth permission for the New Zealand Warriors to fly out to Tamworth to begin training on Sunday, but to also isolate as a team for 2 weeks. That decision, Sal, is yet to be finalised. The NRL was definitely on the agenda at today's cabinet meeting, but at no stage was permission granted. Now, this is the Prime Minister's response when he was asked about it earlier today.
That authority has not been provided. That will be made on the basis of the border assessments of the Australian Border Force, and they're working through that application.
And Pete, yesterday there was a lot of talk of a player standoff. What's happening with that now?
Well, the Rugby League Player Association CEO, Clint Newton, has hosed down those rumours. He'll address the media again later this afternoon. There was a meeting again today. Significant ground has been made, and we understand that an in-principle agreement has been struck between both parties. It's understood the players will receive 80% of their wage moving forward. But, Sal, money wasn't always the only issue. Player welfare and safety was also another concern that was discussed today, and we understand both parties have walked away relatively happy that they've covered that ground. Clint Newton has made it very clear that players will return to training on Monday, and it's been reported that they're all very excited to return to the game they love. Sal?
OK, thanks very much. Peter Fegan reporting for us there. Scott Morrison slapped down suggestions made by mining magnate Andrew Forrest, who claimed the coronavirus may not have originated in China. The PM says he only takes advice from experts in their field.
I don't think anybody's in any fantasy land about where it started. It started in China, and what the world over needs to know, and there's a lot of support for this, is that how did it start, and what are the lessons that can be learned?
The United States has backed Australia's call for an inquiry. There's been a gruesome discovery in New York. Dozens of bodies have been found stored in moving trucks outside a funeral home after a neighbour complained of the smell. Paul Kadak is there. Paul, a dreadful scene.
Good afternoon. Authorities dealing with a really grisly situation here. They got the call from neighbours complaining about an awful smell coming from trucks parked out in front of this funeral home here in Brooklyn. When they arrived, they found dozens of bodies stacked up inside the trucks, which weren't refrigerated. Reports of 60 bodies, as many as 100 bodies. The funeral home says they were just overwhelmed by the number of corpses they were dealing with hundreds of people still dying every day here in New York from coronavirus. Officials have brought in refrigerated trucks to take away some of those bodies. The funeral home now under investigation. They could face fines, even having their licence suspended, as relatives and the mayor demand answers.
This horrible situation that occurred with the funeral home in Brooklyn, absolutely unacceptable. Let's be clear about this. Funeral homes are private organizations, private businesses. They have an obligation to the people they serve to treat them with dignity. I have no idea in the world how any funeral home could let this happen.
While in Michigan, there have been rowdy scenes as a big group of protesters, some carrying firearms, pushed their way inside the state capitol building, demanding that stay-at-home rules be relaxed and businesses be allowed to reopen. It came as lawmakers were inside the chamber debating whether to extend Michigan's state of emergency. And here in New York, we've also had a farewell. The US Navy hospital ship Comfort departing the city. It has been here since March the 30th. It came to help relieve the pressure on the hospital system. After treating around 200 patients, it's going back to base, getting a salute from police and fire vessels as it left. Hopefully a sign of progress in dealing with the virus here in America's hardest hit city. From New York, it's back to you.
A yearly fundraiser raising money for sick children is hoping to raise $250,000. The Starlight Children's Foundation is urging all Australians to make a donation to give happiness to over 5,000 seriously ill and hospitalised children. Starlight's still delivering vital programs to sick kids in need during the coronavirus pandemic through virtual play sessions, interactive live streams and daily emails. Still to come in Sydney's afternoon news on 7. Incredible pictures from the harbour. Tactical police storm a yacht, but it wasn't all it seemed. Plus, the search for a Navy helicopter which plunged from the deck of a warship and into the sea. And highway horror, see what happens next. That's coming up. You're watching 7's 4pm Sydney News, and this is the view from Katoomba. Right now, it's just 5 degrees. 2 more police officers killed in the horrific freeway crash in Melbourne last week have been farewelled at separate funerals. Constable Glenn Humphris and Senior Constable Kevin King, along with 2 other colleagues, died in what was the largest loss of life in a single incident in Victoria Police history. Officers were asked to stop and observe a minutes of silence for their fallen colleagues. Full public memorial services will be held once coronavirus restrictions are lifted. We have incredible pictures to show you now. Specialist officers from Border Force raided a yacht on Sydney Harbour today, but all was not what it seemed. Robert Ovadia joins me from Neutral Bay. Rob, it turned out to be a dramatic training exercise.
Well, to other boaties here on Sydney Harbour, it certainly looked like the real thing, but that is the whole point of an exercise like this. Australian Border Force officers pulled out of their Sydney headquarters just here behind me to intercept a yacht just off Bradley's Head in the harbour, not too far from here. There were 2 rigid inflatable boats, otherwise known as ribs, one of which pulled alongside the yacht before officers streamed on board. It is tricky manoeuvring, as you can tell, even harder out on the ocean where the swell is bigger and the people they're boarding may not be okay with it. The Border Force and the New South Wales Police Marine Area Command practice these drills regularly, but it has become far more pertinent lately, with mass drug importations now more frequently arriving across the Pacific Ocean, typically in a yacht from South America or Mexico. Only late last month, the Lafayette was intercepted a couple of 100 kilometres northeast of Sydney, having rendezvoused with another boat where it allegedly took on board more than 600 kilograms of ice. And as long as that continues, so will exercises like today's.
Thank you, Rob. A desperate search and rescue mission is underway in the Mediterranean Sea after a Canadian military helicopter crashed during NATO exercises. The aircraft was operating off a Canadian frigate when it plunged into water between Greece and Italy. 6 people were on board, with local reports at least 1 body has been recovered. Coronavirus restrictions mean the 75th anniversary celebrations of Russia's World War II victory will be marked with an air show. Dozens of fighter jets and helicopters have rehearsed for the May 9 event after President Putin postponed a full parade. The money raised from Channel 7's Firefight concert is now helping the bushfire recovery effort. A total of almost $11 million was raised, including more than $1 million in donations since the February event. The funds have been distributed to organisations helping devastated towns recover from the summer crisis. Next in 7's afternoon news, while a popular arthritis and asthma drug is about to get a lot cheaper. Plus a 7 News exclusive, meet the woman who's been forced to spend more than a month in hotel isolation. And it's with Jim Wilson. Some big news this afternoon in the NRL ahead of the planned restart.
Tonight on 7 News with Michael Usher.
Australia earns an early mark from COVID restrictions, Border Force drama on Sydney Harbour, and the latest roadblock in the NRL's attempt to relaunch.
Tonight on 7.
The There's new hope for more than 30,000 Australians with cardiovascular disease, rheumatoid arthritis and asthma, with new and expanded listings on the PBS. From today, Repatha will be made available to patients with certain types of high-risk cardiovascular disease caused by high cholesterol. The drug is a breakthrough new medicine that can dramatically lower cholesterol levels, decreasing a person's risk of heart attack or stroke. Up spot now with Jim Wilson. Hello to you, Jim. No green light yet for the Warriors in the NRL.
Not yet, but it's not far away, Sal. Good afternoon to you. Afternoon, everyone. Before we get the latest on the Warriors, the Queensland government has just announced teams will be allowed to fly into the state for games from May 28. Let's go live to our Chief League reporter, Michelle Bishop. Michelle, that's a really significant breakthrough with the Queensland government, but as Sal just mentioned, the Warriors remain in a holding pattern.
Good afternoon, Jim. Yes, our Prime Minister has refuted reports made by other media outlets this morning that they had actually been granted permission to arrive here in Australia on Sunday. That certainly isn't the case, but 7 News understands that it will be rubber stamped very shortly. They will, of course, Border Controls are expected to give it the green light. They'll arrive here on Sunday by a chartered flight set up in their quarantine base in Tamworth. They'll have to endure a 2-week isolation period as well, which is, of course, well in advance of that planned May 28 start date. Now, another significant development today is the in-principle pay deal between the NRL and the players. Let's take a listen to ARL Commission Chairman Peter V'landys.
And the players are totally and utterly committed to recommencement of the game on the 28th of May. They've been mischaracterised in relation to the payments. They're very happy with what the offer is, and we're going to work together.
Now, a little bit of trouble, I guess, brewing in Melbourne. Storm coach Craig Bellamy has absolutely read the riot act to the Storm, his entire squad today, of course, in the wake of the Josh Addo-Carr scandal. From now on, from Monday, he's actually banned social media. Anything that appears on social media will have to be put through the club first, and he's warned everybody at the Melbourne Storm that flouting those social distancing rules will not be tolerated. Jim.
Thanks very much to Michelle Bishop, and we'll hear more from Michelle in 7 News at 6 o'clock. Well, we can break some very good news this afternoon. Australia is the #1 team in Test cricket again. The Aussies ended India's 4.5-year reign on top in a rebirth led by Tim Payne and Justin Langer.
I love our players. I'm really proud of what they've done, and I know Australians are really proud of them and they like the team again.
Well done to Justin Langer and to Tim Payne. Great leadership, but it's a long way from mission accomplished.
In India, and we've got to beat them when they come back.
Australia is also #1 in T20s for the first time, leading into October's Home World Cup that could be postponed. The NFL's newest Aussie giant has revealed the moment that started an incredible journey to the Philadelphia Eagles. 200-centimetre, 125-kilo Matt Leo was working on the Adelaide Oval footbridge as an apprentice plumber when he and his boss realised he was in the wrong job.
Crawling through this little passage and, I turned to him and said, man, I'm too big to be doing this.
Too big for rugby league in South Australia too. He went to the US, went through college and now joins Sydney giant Jordan Mailata at the Eagles. It's a fantastic story. Andy Murray has been crowned as champion of the virtual Madrid Open after beating world number 10 David Goffin in the final. Murray hasn't played a competitive match this year because of injury, but has hinted he'll be back to defend his title next year.
I don't know how that works if this goes down officially as being the winner of the event, but yeah, hopefully I'll be back to play again next year.
It was a glittering ceremony that. Now the 3-time Grand Slam champion has won the regular Madrid Open twice. Adam Scott is intent on playing home tournaments this summer, and he was giving back on Queensland's Sunshine Coast hinterland this morning. He streamed a 9-hole match with old mate Wayne Persky live on Instagram from Mullaney Golf Club. The PGA Tour is due to resume in mid-June, but our world number 6 is cautious.
We can kind of get back to some normality sooner rather than later, and certainly for the people who are doing it really tough, let's pitch in and we'll get there.
Now, some high stakes here this morning at Mullaney. They played for $5 and were all square. In 7 News at 6, meet rising Sydney star Grace Kim as she faces a dilemma all golfers will envy. The Seven Network has struck a new deal to broadcast racing during lockdown. Seven's Saturday racing coverage, headed up by Bruce McAvaney, will continue for the next 7 weeks with all the big races from Melbourne, Brisbane and Adelaide, including the Stradbroke Handicap and the Goodwood.
This is a wonderful opportunity for racing, a fantastic opportunity for racing to showcase itself when we are desperate for live sport.
Good on you, Bruce. We're very excited about this. Coverage starts tomorrow morning at 11:30 on 7-2 and then right here on 7 from midday. Look forward to your company tomorrow morning on Weekend Sunrise. So we've got a very special guest coming your way and we've got more sport at 6 o'clock.
All right, thanks for that, Jim.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere. Our top stories are next, including a 7 News exclusive. Hear from a woman forced to spend more than a month in hotel isolation. Plus highway horror, a truck slams into a car at full speed. See what happens next. The suburbs, where landlords are desperate for tenants, where you can lock in a cheap rental deal. And the pet owner taking some very unusual animals for some exercise while in lockdown.
Live from Sydney, 7 News with Sally Bowery.
Welcome back to our Martin Place headquarters. These are our top stories on 7. The Prime Minister has declared Australians have earned an early mark when it comes to lockdowns. National Cabinet will bring forward its decision on whether to relax them. The best sign yet, we may be getting out of this crisis sooner rather than later. As we wait to see what comes of the meeting in Canberra next week, today marks the beginning of easing restrictions here in New South Wales. A 13th infected resident of the coronavirus-plagued Newmarch House aged care home has died. And still to come, record low rent. Landlords are desperate for tenants across a number of key Sydney suburbs. See how you can use it to negotiate a rental deal. A couple stuck in a hotel quarantine since March have spoken exclusively to 7 News. Carly Douglas, still in isolation in Sydney, says she and her partner feel like they've been locked up in jail. Chief reporter Chris Reason has the story. Chris, how has this happened?
Yeah, Sally, good afternoon to you. Well, on a day that New South Wales is enjoying a greater freedoms thanks to a relaxation on the lockdown laws, spare a thought for this couple, now locked in a coronavirus nightmare for some 33 days. Carly Douglas has told 7 News exclusively about their ordeal, locked in 3 different hotels after returning to Sydney from South America on board that infamous last Qantas flight to land here in Sydney. Initially, they were put into a quarantine hotel and were about to be released at the end of their compulsory 2-week period when they started displaying symptoms of COVID-19, but they had to demand 3 times to get themselves tested, they say. Nurses were reluctant, but they finally did test them, and those tests came back positive. Now, they've been held ever since. They say their care has been good, though, but the ordeal a difficult one.
Yesterday, they actually introduced 15 minutes of walking downstairs in the courtyard. So it feels a little bit like we're in jail because we're monitored on our walking.
Now, the couple have been told they'll be released as soon as they show the all clear for 72 hours. Also, 7 News has spoken exclusively with a crew member of the Ruby Princess today who is also in quarantine lockdown, one of several dozen who were held back when the vessel sailed last Friday. He's raised some serious concerns about hygiene procedures on board the ship, but says that the crew, the ship, the captain are his family. He cannot wait to rejoin them again and hopes the Ruby will continue to sail after this ordeal. We'll have more on his insights at 6 o'clock tonight. Sally.
Thank you, Chris. 2 dramatic pictures now from a busy highway in Melbourne. Horrified drivers have captured the moment a truck slammed into a car, dragging it down the road. As Christy Mayer reports, it's a miracle no one was injured.
Witnesses have described this heart-stopping crash as terrifying to watch, but incredibly the truck driver didn't seem to realise what was happening.
I don't think he knows. Now.
The collision happened just after 7 o'clock this morning on the Western Ring Road at Derrimut, when police say the car skidded in the wet and became jammed against the front of the truck, which was travelling at around 80 kilometres an hour.
It was like a scene out of a movie. You know, you see that stuff on all those sorts of movies and stuff, so I was worried that like the car was going to get run over or rolled or something like that, so yeah, quite scary.
Witnesses beeped their horns frantically as the truck driver continued on without seeming to notice for at least a kilometre.
Little car, and it may have been, right underneath his bonnet. So I don't believe that, he saw what was going on.
Eventually, the truckie slowed after the driver in front saw what was happening and put his hazard lights on, prompting the truck to move off onto a side road.
Quite scary, especially to see it 7 o'clock in the morning.
Police have since interviewed both the driver of the truck and the driver trapped inside the car, and despite the frightening ordeal, say incredibly no one was hurt. At this stage, they won't be pressing any charges.
New South Wales Industry has answered the call to battle COVID, with 1,800 businesses now switching gears to produce corona protection. As Amber Laidler has a story from a company in Marrickville which has undergone major change because of COVID-19.
Carbonate here in Marrickville is traditionally a design and printing business, but when COVID-19 reached Australia, the company was forced back to the drawing board. Early on, one of their staff recognised an opportunity to repurpose their technologies and tap into a market preparing for mass shortages. It now provides another local company, Sentry Medical, with protective face shields used by frontline New South Wales health workers.
I never would have thought we'd be producing PPE and supplying the medical space, definitely not. We've got 25 staff or so and additional casuals brought in.
Carbonate is one of more than 1,800 businesses across the state joining the fight and answering an urgent call from the government to fill the medical supply chain and supply critical personal protective equipment during the coronavirus crisis.
We would have had severe shortages with certain product ranges, and hence why I jumped at the chance to work with him pretty quickly.
I've been so heartened by the number of businesses that have come forward and offered innovative solutions.
The emergency supply portal has now been established to connect other medical retailers in need with local suppliers that can produce PPE products. If you think your business could help, the state government is urging you to register your interest online.
Police are looking for two men who opened fire on a parked car in Sydney's West, leaving a man fighting for his life in hospital. Andrew Denny has the details. Andrew, what happened?
Well, a night of violence has left a disturbing scene here at Merrylands in Sydney's West, with two men shot and a trail of blood left for 100 metres along a residential street. It happened just before 9:30 last night on Badham Street. These security pictures show the moment a gunman opens fire on two 24-year-old men who were sitting in a car parked in a driveway. One of those gets out and then sprints away to safety, and despite being shot through the chest, he runs about a block, disappearing into a park and then re-emerging a minute later, bleeding badly, before collapsing on the footpath. It's another 10 minutes before emergency services arrive.
Slowly dying. You can see him moving his legs left to right.
Police have spent all day processing this crime scene. The shooters are believed to be two men who were wearing hoodies and took off in a light-coloured SUV.
I want to assure members of the community that this is not a random incident, and that police strongly believe that this is a targeted attack.
Now, police say they are only receiving limited cooperation from the victims at this stage, but they are confident that there are people in the community who know who these attackers are.
More than 100 Commonwealth Bank branches will close their doors for about 6 months as social distancing rules cause a massive drop in the number of people doing their banking in person. 500 staff will be redeployed to online services and call centres to cope with an increase in digital demand. CommBank is following in the footsteps of the other major banks, which have also closed dozens of branches. It's been revealed residents in Western and southwestern Sydney get less health funding than patients in the inner suburbs. Chris Maher is covering the story. Chris, how big is the gap and what's the reason behind it?
Well, there may be major construction underway at hospitals like here at Campbelltown, but new figures suggest an alarming gap between health expenditure in Sydney's West and elsewhere. In submissions to a parliamentary inquiry, they've shown up the differences in funding in Western Sydney hospitals and health facilities on a per resident basis. $1,700 per capita in the west compared to $3,200 budgeted in the Sydney health area, a difference of $800.
No matter what service in our hospitals you go to here in West and Southwest Sydney, there is a serious shortfall.
The inquiry's been told one medical field where there is a stark disparity is cancer treatment, with fewer chemotherapy services in the west, along with a lack of mammogram machines. The state opposition says the expected steep population growth from Penrith through to Campbelltown will see hospital services placed under extreme pressure. Doctors have warned that funding is not going to the areas that really need it.
We should have an equitable health system where every Australian has access to the care that they need.
The state government says its budgets contain a record amount of health funding, but it's up to health officials to decide where and how that money is allocated.
Thanks, Chris. A man has been jailed for 35 years for murdering a Queanbeyan service station attendant during a violent rampage. The worker was stabbed to death at a Caltex just outside of Canberra in 2017. Brian Seymour reports. Brian, his killer was sentenced today.
Yes, good afternoon, Sally. Good afternoon to everyone watching. This extraordinary and gruesome murder was committed by two child killers in 2017. Today they're aged 18 and 19, and the maximum sentence handed down here at the Supreme Court. It was just before midnight in April 2017 when the two boys approached Caltex service station attendant Zashin Akbar. They stabbed him to death, and then one of them scrawled the letters IS for Islamic State in blood in the window of the service station. The next morning the two boys pulled over a motorist. He was stabbed in the lung but survived. They then led police on a high-speed pursuit and they were finally arrested in the ACT. Today in sentencing, Justice Jeffrey Bellew said that the schizophrenia of the older boy, who was now 19, did play a part in reducing his moral culpability and the need for general deterrence in sentencing him. However, he ultimately sentenced him to the maximum 35 years, 6 months jail. His younger accomplice, now 18, was sentenced to 18 years, 4 months jail. Their 29-year-old victim was a student who was also working here and dreamed of buying a home and bringing his sick parents here. So ultimately, Sally, 3 young lives destroyed in this horrific crime. Of the 2 young men, one will be eligible for parole in 2031, the other in 2044.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the pandemic in the UK has peaked, but he won't say when the country's lockdown will be lifted. With 6,000 new cases in the past 24 hours, there are fears of a second wave. Sarah Greenhalgh has more.
Well, the Prime Minister says the UK is past the peak of the outbreak. That's despite the numbers, with another 674 lives lost in the past 24 hours and more than 6,000 new confirmed coronavirus cases. This was Boris Johnson's very first press conference since he overcame COVID-19, but he didn't talk about the one thing everyone was hoping he would address, which is when will the lockdown be lifted. He did confirm that a roadmap will be released next week, which will outline how and when restrictions could be eased.
And so my message to everyone again today is your effort and your sacrifice is working and has been proved to work.
On another very happy note, World War II veteran Captain Tom Moore, who's become pretty famous over the past couple of weeks, has turned 100. He set out a few weeks ago to walk 100 laps of his garden to try and raise £1,000 for the National Health Service. He has now raised a staggering £32 million to celebrate his birthday and in recognition of those incredible efforts. Today he was made an honorary colonel. He then enjoyed a flyover over by a Spitfire and a Hurricane. They both flew past his home 3 times, and then he of course received a telegram from the Queen. So a very special 100th birthday celebration for a man who has inspired so many people around the world.
We're live to CommSec for the latest on your money next. Then record low rent in Sydney will show you where to look. And meet the woman who hasn't let lockdown stop her from giving her exotic pets some exercise. And it's 15 degrees in Cronulla. We'll have the forecast soon. 2 police officers have escaped serious injury after an out-of-control 4-wheel drive slammed into their parked patrol car west of Sydney. Two officers were conducting roadside breath tests in the Blue Mountains. When they were hit, they suffered only minor injuries. Time to check finance now with James Tao at CommSec. Good afternoon to you, James. How has the Australian share market finished up the week?
Yeah, very good afternoon to you, Sally. It certainly wasn't a good afternoon for the Aussie share market. The ASX 200 today falling to its worst daily decline in 5 weeks. The index falling around 276 points, or 5% in a single session, giving back a majority of the gains made throughout April. Basically, investors are still concerned about the impacts of coronavirus for business profits, but also the economy as a whole. So today, we saw every single sector in negative territory. Only 7 of the top 200 stocks actually improving. Some of the heaviest losses coming through for our resource sectors, the likes of our energy and mining stocks, down around 7 or 8%. ResMed had a better day, though, up around 3%, and the Aussie dollar is at 64.6 US cents.
OK, thanks very much, James Tao from CommSec for us this afternoon. You're watching 7's Afternoon News live across Sydney. Still to come, it's important to take your pets for a walk, especially during lockdown. But coming up, you'll meet a woman who's facing a rather unique problem. Her pets don't exactly walk, but that hasn't stopped her. That's just ahead. Sydney's property market is showing signs of returning to life, with more people looking for properties for sale. Serena Andaloro is in Glebe. Serena, house prices haven't taken the big hit that many feared.
Good afternoon to you, Sally. It might come as a pleasant surprise, but Sydney house values haven't taken a significant hit. They're holding true despite the pandemic and unprecedented social distancing measures. According to new CoreLogic data, there has been, however, a sharp drop in market activity and a weakening in buyer sentiment, but all signs are pointing at the downturn being brief.
Transaction volumes are down about 40% over the month and are actually at their lowest level since 1990.
4 weeks ago, I was feeling very, very negative about the market, but now we have seen that uptick in terms of buyer activity. It is looking a lot more positive.
What we have seen is a surge in rental vacancies, with landlords slashing rent prices to try and keep tenants happy. At 6, we'll tell you where the biggest savings are being offered. Suburbs spread right across Sydney, so you can negotiate a better deal.
At this stage, we can see that the power is with the tenant, not with the landlord. It's something that I've never seen happen before.
In terms of vacancies, units in Western and Southwestern Sydney are struggling. These places are seeing the lowest views online on realestate.com.au.
Thanks, Serena. An iconic Sydney eatery will soon be booted from its prime location near the Opera House. Owners of the Sydney Cove Oyster Bar failed to keep the site after an unsuccessful bid to renew its lease. It's the first time the property has gone to tender since the restaurant won it in 1987. A petition to save the business has begun, amassing more than 3,000 signatures. Sydney 6pm News is coming up with Michael Usher. Hello to you, Michael. What are you working on in the newsroom?
Hi there, Sally. Here's what we have for you tonight. The end is certainly in sight when it comes to those coronavirus restrictions. The Prime Minister says Australians have earned themselves an early mark. So when will that come? We'll tell you all the details at 6 o'clock. Plus, in New South Wales, rules around house guests have changed from today. A reminder about what you can and can't do this weekend. It looks like a pay deal has finally been struck between the NRL and its players. We're now just waiting on approval for the Warriors to land in Australia. Hear from the game's boss at 6. We'll have the latest on that manhunt in Sydney's West. Shots fired into a parked car. At least one person's fighting for life. A truly violent response to coronavirus rules in the United States as armed protesters storm a government building demanding change. And dramatic scenes on our harbour today, the moment Border Force officers take over a yacht. The full story tonight. So, Sally, we'll have that for you. Plenty more, of course, coming up in Sydney's 7 News tonight at 6.
See you then. Thanks, Michael. A Queensland woman has an unusual way to beat boredom in isolation, which has got neighbours talking. Every day, Janet Hedges takes her 6 pet pythons for a walk down the driveway. Yasmin Bonnell has the story.
It might sound unusual, but Janet Hedges says her 6 pet pythons are helping her cope in isolation. She's been walking them up her driveway every morning to get out of the house for some exercise. Janet takes them out one by one and they follow her as she walks down the driveway.
It gives me things to do because I don't sit and think all day, and by walking them and giving them, say, half an hour to an hour each day, that's a lot of their day.
She says without family nearby, her snakes are the only thing keeping her going. Despite living in a unit with a shared driveway, Janet's neighbours aren't worried at all.
If anything, more fascinated, and just know, there goes Janet walking the snake skin, no worries, and they drive their cars in and out, and I just carry on and, wave and carry on. So, yeah, probably think I'm mad, but,
Janet says as therapeutic as snakes are, it's important to remember they're wild animals and should be treated as such.
Next in 7's Afternoon News, we'll have a look at your weekend weather forecast. Deserted ski lodges have been blanketed in fresh snow as a wintry blast moves across the southeast. 35 centimetres fell overnight with more snow on the way. Dustings of powder are expected over much of the inland ranges, including the Blue Mountains. Time now to have a check of the weather, and thick cloud from that strong cold front has continued to move offshore, taking the rain with it and also some of those storms. Behind it, though, that very cold air mass is lingering across New South Wales, and that is helping to trigger the snow across the high peaks. Having a look at the capital cities for the start of the weekend, we can expect a top of 24 degrees in Brisbane, plenty of sunshine. Still windy in Sydney, though, 19 degrees. Canberra, 10 degrees and a few showers. Also slightly wet into Melbourne, 13 degrees there, 11 in Hobart. Adelaide should be mostly fine, a top of 27 degrees in Perth. And a quick check of our Sunday, and it should be mostly fine along the east coast. Still fairly cold temperatures though through the southeast. And that is Sydney's 4 p.m. news for this Friday. Michael Usher will bring you 7 News at 6. I'm Sally Barry. Stay with 7 now for The Chase Australia. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great night. Bye.